Hello. Today I am reading the first chapter of my book, Christmas Carol Society. I loved writing this book. It has some of my favorite characters in it. I hope you will enjoy. Christmas Carol Society, Chapter 1. Welcome, welcome, said a high, thin female voice quite eagerly. The person addressed, a man who knew that he looked rather younger than his 27 years, turned and hurried to put on a smile. The middle-aged woman bustled forward, her ankle-length skirts swishing oddly with each step while she extended a hand. "I'm Clarissa Dartmoor. You may call me Miss Dartmoor," she said firmly, but still very cheerful. "I am the society leader. You are?" The man returned the handshake with a slight nod. "Charlie Baker. Pleased to meet you." "Ah, yes." Miss Dartmoor pulled a folded paper out of her dress pocket, smoothing her silver-streaked hair back into a bun with her free hand. "I have you on my list, Charles." Charlie cringed hearing the name, but didn't say anything. He had signed up as Charlie for a reason. Miss Dartmoor spoke again. "Feel free to find a seat and a cup of coffee. The rest of the group should be here soon. Do help yourself to refreshments, Charles," she added again with a look up and down his figure. "You look half frozen. One might imagine that you thought to walk here in this unusual cold front." Not bothering to admit that he really had walked, Charlie murmured his thanks and went for the coffee. He had felt his dark curls tousled in the outdoor wind, and they probably gave him a rather eccentric, wind-blown look at the moment. "Not sure what else makes it look like I walked here. She's right about a cold front, though. House hasn't been this frigid since I don't know when. Desert town weather shouldn't resemble Arctic continents." Technically, he knew Arctic zones couldn't compare to the cold of his hometown, but he enjoyed the mental analogy. The only other person present, a gruff-looking, middle-aged man wearing a coat that appeared quite old, sat in the farthest corner of the semicircle of chairs. With his head sunk against his breast, his eyes closed, and his arms crossed, he looked the picture of wishing to be left alone. Charlie gave him his wish, sitting on the opposite end. He glanced around the room again, wrapping his hands around the styrofoam cup. One of the smaller rooms belonging to the house or community center, it wouldn't hold much. Besides the semicircle of chairs and the table to his left with the refreshments, a much smaller table stood by the back wall with a few papers and a pen. The rest of the room stood empty, except for a sign taped to the back wall. Printed in bold, gilded lettering, "Meeting Place of the Christmas Carol Society," announced the order of the evening for anyone entering the room. Not until the top of the hour struck did the rest of the expected group begin to file in. Charlie counted 15 people, including himself, ranging in age from what appeared to be late teens to early 60s. Miss Dartmoor greeted each one, her small gray eyes shining with delight. Charlie waited and watched. Each member filed in, most still shuddering off the cold. A few made eye contact with him, and Charlie nodded in response. A teen with fashionable jeans and his messy hair under a beanie, an older man already white-haired and dressed in a suit, and a woman clearly arriving after a baking episode where she had managed to dust her entire head with flour before forgetting about it. It's a motley group, all brought together because of an old book. Miss Dartmoor clapped her hands at exactly 10 after 7, and the low murmurs of mutual greeting ceased. "If I could ask everyone to find his seat, please," she said. "Then we shall begin." A polite scurry followed, and the last of the seats filled, the chair next to Charlie taken last of all. Charlie reached into the inner pocket of his trench coat, which he still wore, and pulled out a worn hardcover volume. "I don't know if I'll actually need it. Best to be prepared, though." Miss Dartmoor clapped again quietly. "I am so pleased to see you all," she said, her high voice thrilling. "Welcome to our first official meeting of the Christmas Carol Society. We are drawn together here in our various walks of life because we share a common interest, a love, if you will, for the incomparable A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens." Charlie bit his lip, then glanced at a woman sitting beside him, complete in 1800s clothing. "I may have landed myself into a meeting of crazy people. Incomparable is a bit much for any book." "A Christmas Carol is quite easily the greatest masterpiece in the fictional world." Miss Dartmoor paused to smile. "Mr. Dickens used words of such elegance and with such mastery that they literally become the poetry of prose. Thrilling lines such as," here the woman closed her eyes and began to recite, "'Old Marley was as dead as a doornail.' Mind, I don't mean to say that I know of my own knowledge what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hand shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was as dead as a doornail." The woman sighed with obvious pleasure. "Thrilling lines such as these grace the pages as we join Ebenezer on his eye-opening journey. Lines that fire our imagination and ignite our souls." fire our imagination and ignite our souls? For the next 30 minutes, Charlie listened as Miss Dartmoor extolled the virtues surrounding the adventures of Ebenezer Scrooge. He tried not to frown, as any outward disapproval or confusion might be impolite, but Charlie couldn't have dreamed up half of what the woman said. Long his favorite book, Charlie had never idolized A Christmas Carol, but began to wonder if Miss Dartmoor and her friends did. He continued to listen. Watching Ebenezer revisit his past, truly see his present, and catch a glimpse of his future are moments that can and do influence us as the readers. We experience his joy and pain. We are affected by his growing guilt and distaste for himself. We cringe with him over the shadows of his bitter end. We cheer on those who seek to bring Ebenezer to the daylight, to pull him from the man he has become. The ghosts of past, present, and future strive with him, seeking to reach a man who has heretofore closed off his heart and mind to others, such as Fred, such as Cratchit. The ghosts strive with heroic persistence. The two men show him love or respect despite who he is. Miss Dartmoor paused to clap her hands together again, her smile brightening. In the end, there is success. The ghosts, Fred, and even the Cratchits play distinct roles in the changes that issue from Ebenezer Scrooge. In a glorious emancipation from his own chains, Ebenezer turns from his miserably miserable self and becomes a new man. Ah, what could compare to such a tale? And we can learn so much from it. We can take so much from these glorious pages. Then we take what we learn and we put it to use. We extract the nectar from this beloved story and apply it where we may. As the woman completed her passionate summation and general applause broke out, the gruff man in the old coat among the most enthusiastic, Charlie nearly forgot to join them at all. He tried to remember which part of the soliloquy he would applaud, but gave up and tried to be polite. He watched the woman smile brightly at the end of the applause, clapping her own hands. Again. She does that a lot. My friends, we are swiftly nearing that blessed time of year that sets the stage for this tale that we love so much. Thanksgiving being this Thursday, we will then have only 4 weeks to Christmas, and we have much work to do. Work? What work is she planning for an hour meeting once a week? The older man in business suit, seated next to a woman in a bright red dress and an equally bright green scarf, nodded knowingly before taking a sip of his coffee. I don't mean the usual work either. Miss Dartmoor looked at each of her listeners in turn. Charlie shifted in his seat. Oh, no, not the usual work. We are a special group. Drawn together as we are by our mutual admiration for this book, I have an assignment for each of the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas. Charlie raised an eyebrow, watching the excitable little woman with a vague sense of dread. Finally, Miss Dartmoor smiled brightly, her eyes more brilliant than before. Proper meetings will begin next week. We shall have a lecture. I'll give out our first assignment. Until then, I want this to be a close-knit group in a short time, so let's spend the rest of our meeting getting to know each other a little bit while we enjoy the refreshments. Charlie watched her clap her hands yet again and give an excited bounce. He didn't know what to think. Miss Dartmoor looked from one to another in the group, still smiling. Let us get to know one another, my friends. That is the end of the chapter. I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you're curious about the rest of the book, that you'll take a look.